AMC people, it's so funny because AMC really is the gift that keeps on giving as relates to any kind of business or finance news. I couldn't sleep really well last night. And so I woke up and I was actually checking out Tony DiNaro's feed. Big shout out to him. And he essentially posted something that I thought was so interesting. And I thought I'd do a quick comment on it because I do think that I can see the drum beats of news flow that is going in the wrong direction, for lack of a better way to describe it. And it's about the NYSE company listing rules as relates to what voting rights should and should not exist. And specifically, it has to do with the Antara transaction in general. And what I think, hey, big ads, what I think, I might have to turn off the chat because I get really distracted, but what I think is actually happening, and if anything, I'm seeing this spin suggest that there's a problem because of this rule. But honestly, when I read it, it actually sounds like, and it clarifies why the Antara transaction was done the way that it was done. And so I'm going to share my screen and just show you some of the places. I have went ahead and posted links in the show notes, including the portion that I think Tony did really well. I'm not going to redo that because I honestly don't feel like it at 6:45 in the morning. And I have to kind of, I have to keep this in the short. So that helps me out a lot. All right. Past performance, not indicative of future returns. We always have to say that. You guys know I own the APE shares. I don't own the AMC shares at this point. We've already gone through that in 1,000,001 videos. So no worries about that. I'll come back to some of your questions, big ads. Just give me a half a beat on that. But let me just show you what I'm seeing. First and foremost, what we're really talking about here is the NYSE rules, okay? And where you will find that is listed in my show notes. So take a look. But the NYSE has this listed company manual. And that basically dictates some rules that you need to follow if you're going to be listed on the NYSE. And specifically, it's this rule right here that we're talking about. That you can see that I've kind of highlighted here for you. This is the shareholder approval rule 312.03. Now, if you just go to Google search this rule, it can be very difficult. And aside from the legal language, and the reason it can be very difficult when you're trying to find it is, and I really don't recommend you do that. That's why I posted the link so that you don't have to. The issue is that if you go to Google search it, it'll give you the most popular result, not the actual result. And the challenge is that this particular rule has gone under quite a bit of transformation. And so I've posted that rule along with a citation of a legal brief that describes that rule in greater detail so that you can also see when that rule got enacted. So I will go back to that page, but I'll show you the citation that I'm giving those people that want to just do more investigation on this. This is Venable LLP. I tried to look at some of the legal guys that I know a little bit better. I don't know these guys quite as well as I know some of the others, but when I looked into like who's actually doing the articles, these look like people that are probably just fine. What you want to know about this is that this, if you Google search this, it'll come up like it was just a proposal. It is not just a proposal. It was enacted in April 2nd, 2021. All of the amendments were enacted such that when you look at the actual, if you look at that legal brief along with the actual NYSE company documents, which are, hold on, 1 second here, the NYSE rules. If you look at this, between those two, it should help clarify out what's going on. Okay, so when we look at this stuff, I just want to show you, there's a couple things that you do want to kind of keep in mind from a jargon perspective. The first thing is that the Antara transaction was a debt to equity transaction. It was done in completely all stock. Okay, it was an all stock, and specifically it was a preferred stock transaction. So when you're going through each one of these trying to figure out what's up, realize that every time it says common stock, unless it says additional stuff, that whole line doesn't apply. Okay, and what we really want to focus on is a couple of things, and it really is this one piece of that whole thing, and that's right here. It's section 31203. And you're going to scroll down because section A is equity compensation, has nothing to do with it. Section B, a lot of section B deals with common stock issuance. Okay. If it's just common stock, not much you can do. Okay. And then you'll see a lot of stuff that's related party transactions. Related party transactions has a very specific legal definition. With Antara, it's not quite a related parties transaction. So so most of it is not going to be relevant until you get all the way down to this section right here. Section 2, but it says the number of shares of common stock to be issued is or will be upon issuance equal to or in excess of 20% of the number of shares of common stock outstanding before the issuance of common stocks or of securities convertible or exercisable. So this section 2 is what we care about. That's what we care about. So a lot of people are looking at that and they're like, well, Antara definitely got more than 20%. As we know from the initial proxy filing, which I will go back to and reference so you can see it clearly, it was something like 28%. Now, there have been some sales which were approved and in accordance. And to me, we can get to that in just a second. I don't actually think it's that big of a deal. I know that it still affects the stock in a particular way, but it looks actually reasonable given what you'd expect as typical fund activity in the first part of the year because you have redemptions that happen at this time. So I'm not upset with them for that. But we will get into it because I know that's really controversial. If you guys would just give me a half a beat to get through this and then ping the comments, I will address them until I run out of time. So if you look at this, the however is the most important thing, okay? Shareholder approval will not be required for any issuance involving, okay, any public offering for cash. That is irrelevant to this because I already told you this was not a cash transaction. They got stock on the other side of it. And this one is, the second one is important. Any other financing that is not a public offering for cash, which is what this is, in which the company is selling securities for cash, if such financing involves a sale of common stocks or securities convertible into or exercisable for common stock at a price as great as the minimum price, provided that if the securities in such financing are issued in connection with the acquisition of the stock or assets of another company, shareholder approval will be required if the issuance of such a securities alone or when combined with any other present potential issuance of common stock or securities convertible exceeds either 20% of the number of shares of common stock or 20%. Okay, this is absolutely relevant. However, let's talk about what then they have to do because this isn't a no. This is just a shareholder approval will not be required. If you look at what's actually happening, you can see that shareholder approval is part of what's required, but I'm going to show you some of the stuff here. So the financing, first of all, was not for cash. And also it does exceed the minimum price. And here's where I think, so we'll just get those two pieces off of the table first. And here's where I'm going to show you what Tony posted, which I thought was great, so that I don't have to do the work. Because I love that when people do work for me because I am one lady trying to do this by myself. So this is what Tony posted. The link is in my the link is in my show notes for this. And you can see he does the calculation. It looks correct to me. This is where Antara's cost basis is versus where the transaction was done. So they are cool, okay on that. Now let's go back to the NYSE listing rules because there's also one other piece that I want to show you. So because it exceeds that and it's not in connection with this, they're good. Okay. Essentially, read it carefully, but you'll see that they are cool with this one as well. Now, the other thing, regardless, that I actually think they're okay with, but we'll see. Like if somebody still tries to push this section, my suspicion is the reason they did it the way that they did it is because of section 312.05, which is if exceptions may be made to the shareholder approval policy upon application to the exchange when, one, the delay in securing stockholder approval would seriously jeopardize the financial viability of the enterprise, even though they have enough runway for a period of time. I actually think that they could still use this exceptions clause. I'm not a lawyer. All right, I get it. If you're a lawyer and you work for the SEC or whatever it is, full props to you. But this is actually correct as far as that goes. Like, this is probably like what my suspicion is, they would use this, and that would be super okay. Then the other thing that I think is kind of relevant is that this stuff is still coming up for a vote. So one of the requirements in there, I'm not going to try to find it, requires that if they're going to do any of this activity, they have to give notice within 10 days that they're going to do this, and the audit committee has to agree. The audit committee agreed, and they also did give notice. So I think they're fine as far as being able to allow Antara to take the shares. And I want to just show you this so it's really clear, and then I will get to a couple of questions before I start my morning in earnest here. Let me share this. Okay, this was the proxy dated February 14th. I'm just going to do it this way so you guys can see it a little better. But you can see that it's 27.8% of the percentage of class outstanding, not the total percent. So you have to then adjust that for the percentage of total shares outstanding. So this is just 27% of the APE shares is what Antara owns, but it comes out to be around, I want to say 12, 13% of the stock, but I haven't done the math yet, to be fair. But that's what they own, is the 27%. Then they did sell a portion of that position, but they are still a percent of class represented by the amount is still 25% of the total shares outstanding of APE shares only. Okay, so that's their share ownership, which puts them in a place that is actually below the 20% of total voting rights. Okay, so realize that too. So even though I highlighted that element, technically they're below that 20% threshold. So all of it should still be okay. So this is just people getting really excited as far as the fact that there's really kind of limited news flow. In my opinion, this is people trying to come up with stuff because there's limited news flow until basically the company reports later. I think it's like early next week. It's like the 28th or something like that. So we shall see. Now, let me look through some of these. Post your questions again in case I don't get to it. Good morning from the UK. Hey, Ja. Good morning to you too. Why am I not allowed to vote? Okay, I've said this in a couple of different episodes, and I'll keep saying it because I do think it's hard to kind of sort through my stuff and figure out where I'm saying it. But if you own shares, actual shares, or if you own something like a GDR, a depository receipt, you should be able to vote. If you own a depository receipt, if it's done the same way that it's done in the US for depository receipts, your shares are held by the bank, and you would get it. I'll have to do a different episode on it, but there's like a custodian, then they hold it on your behalf, and then they give you the voting rights. So technically you should be able to vote, but one of the challenges is a lot of these like broker dealers that I can't stand, but I'm not going to throw shade on them right this minute. I'll throw shade on them in their own private episode. They actually are giving you they're actually not giving you swap. They're doing it via swap or an equity linked note. And an equity linked note is a type of synthetic that basically links and gives you the share price exposure without giving you actually ownership of the stock. And they do that because essentially there are rules and regulations for the ownership of stock overseas. And so they think it's a clever way for you to be able to have participation with the equity, but you have participation, but you don't have any voting rights. As a result, if you are buying this stock outside of the United States of America, then you will need to check with your broker dealer to double check what you actually own. And this has nothing to do, for those of you that think this is Adam Aaron that did it, it's not. It's specifically broker dealers overseas that do not want to comply with SEC US regulations and therefore have created a structure overseas to give you some ability to have access to the equity upside, but you have no ownership of the company. It is the most common example of this that isn't that kind of weirdness. I mean, I don't think it's a bad thing necessarily, but it is weird. But the most common thing that even the U.S. shareholder is probably regularly knows is the VIX. The ticker is Astra's VIX. That trades on like that's a future, the VIX futures, and then there are instruments that then trade synthetically off of that VIX price. But the VIX isn't anything other than an exchange traded note in the sense, or not. I'm fumbling because it's so early in the morning, the coffee is still integrating in. But the VIX isn't an actual instrument of other than a price that moves up and down that someone calculates. And essentially, that's what a lot of foreign countries have done. Ham, you got to watch your language because it's first thing in the morning. I can't handle that. But you have a right to see, you have the right to feel it however you feel. What is it, Jaw, is that your broker? Yeah, that's really not okay. If you're broke, they should be able to tell you what instrument you actually own. But essentially, the other thing you can do is in your settings, if you set it to where like most broker dealers in the US have this requirement. I don't know as soon as you go overseas what the rules are because that's just not my base of knowledge, but you should be able to go into your settings and have all your proxy statements mailed directly to you. Now, the timing is going to be really short if you haven't already done that. But for example, Berkshire Hathaway, which is a company that I also cover like crazy, I have the proxy statement mailed to me because I want the tickets mailed to me so that if I go, I have the tickets in my hand. And if I give the tickets to someone else, I have the physical copy. But they absolutely have shareholders that come from all over the world. And that's how they're getting their tickets, is by having the proxy statement mailed directly to them, voting directly that way. That if you've never received any kind of documents from a company, then check the settings to make sure that you are actually having it mailed to you, or that the email that they're supposed to deliver to you is accurate. But it is a hint that possibly your broker, either the settings is wrong or your broker is giving you an exchange traded note, not the actual company stuff itself. Okay. The vote, okay, Jaw, I have an earlier episode where I go through all of this, and it's not a given that it's a yes, because in order for it to go through, especially, you have to actually, you need a majority. That's really what it is. And it's very hard to get a majority. Like it's much harder than people think to get 50% of your voters to actually vote. So it's not a given. That is why it says in the proxy statement, as well as I'm more than sure he will reiterate it, and it's in every single press release. Every vote is going to matter on this. Just to give you a sense for it would be very uncommon. I mean, like Berkshire is really one of the best examples because they get close to 50% of their shareholders voting every single time, but they don't always get 50% of the shareholders. And that's despite the fact that the A shares, the A share shareholders are like super avid shareholders and usually do vote. Now, part of the reason that that's the case is that a lot of these shares are held by some sort of passive investor that doesn't vote. And that's a longer story, but it's a little bit less relevant in this case, but it's not irrelevant because you do still have APE and AMC showing up in various indices. Let me go down a little bit. I gave Jaw a lot of time. Hopefully I answered most of your questions. If not, go ahead, and he has 60 million. I'm not sure what that reference is. Big ads, I'm not sure what you're trying to get at. Okay, Rebecca, here's the thing on this. You have to actually, so being on the threshold list is a little different from being in violation of Reg Show. But with AMC, I have to double check because I think what's actually happened is they keep taking it below the reg show requirement. So it's like kissing that 0.5% of total shares outstanding, and then it comes back up. And so it like 5 days, and then it dips down, and then it comes back up, unfortunately resets the clock. It's a real problem. And I have an episode just on that, as I think a few of you guys know, on the SEC violation. I think that continuing to ask the SEC to fine them is a worthy cause, but it's not going to solve the problem, because I think they must be really handcuffed on how much they can actually charge people that are in violation. I do think, and until someone tells me otherwise, which I'm super cool with because I'm not a legal expert, I do think that the contract itself for hypothecation should be regulated under the Consumer Protection Act in the US at least. And that is more of because it is technically a form of lending of your assets. So that if it goes to a different regulatory body that protects consumer lending, then the fines that particular organization can give are significantly higher. And I say it in that video just to give you guys reference. So check out that video if you have not. But for example, Wells Fargo violated mortgage lending related procedures, and they were fined enough to be the equivalent of about half of a quarter's of earnings, which is enough to really be a problem, like a significant problem. So just take a look at that, because I have the actual numbers there. I haven't memorized them. Let's see. Cool, Ham. That's awesome. Here's the thing. I am not a day trader, nor am I a person that knows certain things like the MOAS folks. So I'll never be able to comment on that. My channel is really dedicated to just reading the stuff and explaining it. And that's it. Like, as far as like what to do with the stock, I will tell you what I'm doing, but I need to stay I'm just one person. I can't fight the SEC by myself. So I will never be I don't really give investment advice, but I do think that the momentum traders and the day traders have a really special skill that I just don't have. But more power to you. I think it's awesome when people make money. So that's cool. Okay. I transferred my shares of AMC and GameStop from Cash App and Webull to Fidelity. Fidelity didn't update my cost basis. Okay. That one, I don't know the answer to it. You should be able to call your broker and just have them manually input that. Because it's not that it's not the broker that actually keeps track of your cost basis on those transfers. It's actually your accountant that does. And it used to be the case that you would never get that field, but then like over the last 5 to 10 years, the brokers just as a courtesy have given you the field that they have on file. When you do transfers, which is awesome, because I actually think moving it to a Fidelity or something like that, whatever you want to say about the big brokerage houses, they are regulated a little bit more aggressively than some of the newer applications out there. But so it's essentially a data issue that you're experiencing, but your accountant is the one that's really supposed to keep that cost basis information on your behalf. So it's a weird thing. I would call your broker and just ask them to update it. Maybe you can send them a letter or whoever it is, but that's what's happening. But it shouldn't affect you in other ways. If it is, it's just something that, like everybody's situation is very unique, but hopefully that clarifies. I'm going to go down to the bottom. Where do we think APE is heading, May, towards the vote? Man, I really don't know. I don't know. I'm holding on to it because the spread is still there, as well as I really kind of want to hear what he has to say. Here's the thing. He says it in a couple of different clips, and I have said it the entire time because I'm not a momentum trader. Like, it's just really not my skill set, guys. So like when it comes down to it, it really is going to be whether or not he can turn this company around, and also the timing of it. So it will be a wild ride until he can really remove the thesis from the shorts. And so what we're really going to look for in these financials are a handful of things. Number one, how much progress did he make on becoming more profitable? And there's really two ways to think about profitability, guys. Okay. Because a lot of times people will just look at the earnings number and say, oh, earnings was bad. But with a company that's going through this kind of corporate transactions plus turnaround plus sale of assets plus a purchase of assets, the earnings is very deceiving because it's very below the line. And I go through it, and I will absolutely go through the earnings when they come out and walk you through it. So number one, I wouldn't look at earnings, EPS. I would look at operating income and then try to understand the pieces that are between operating income and earnings. And then you actually have to do this calculation on free cash flow. And you can kind of look at operating cash flow, but what you're really looking for is the following. That's why you look at these metrics. You're trying to figure out if the man has enough cash to actually give the company enough time to turn around. Now, the reason that I did the initial video for me was December 6th. You guys can see it. It's in there. But when I was doing it, when I looked at his financials from last quarter, it looked like, given sequentially what was happening, he was really close to being cash flow positive. And so that was very exciting for me because, you know, literally he's the last man standing in theater, at least in the United States. Overseas, it may be different. For sure, it's different in parts of Asia. And to me, when you've got someone that's got a potential kind of monopoly, then it becomes really interesting, especially if you've got this like discount that you can get on the ape shares. Because originally I wasn't thinking that anyone would ever care about my videos, and it's really been nice that you guys are supportive of this. That's why I keep trying to do videos on this, is because it seems to be that that's what you guys are enjoying. But yeah, so with ape and I want to say this, and I will do a separate video on it after there's a dead time. The only reason that all of this can happen, like everybody wants to like be mean to the people that are positive on Ape and AMC, and they're like, and call Mr. Aaron all kinds of names. But the real people that you should be calling names are the people that told you to short Ape shares to 1/7 the price of AMC. Because let me tell you, that was like, if you're a short seller and you did that, you're kind of a jerk. I don't really know another way to say it, but you gave the opportunity for something that doesn't usually happen. So this is something that I will walk through in the future. But essentially, Antara as the debt holder, if they were, I don't know exactly when they became owners of the debt, but I think they did it as issued, meaning they issued it at par plus a discount plus the interest rate or whatever it was. Won't go into that because that does require its own video. And then that thing fell to 50 cents on the dollar if you read the Q. So they lost 50% on that investment. And so what happened was that they took the Ape shares, because the Ape shares were always 100% convertible into AMC shares, which I talk about in that first initial video that I did on December 6th. But because they were trading at 1/7 the price, it made sense. And I'll tell you, if this doesn't go through, then it would probably make sense for other debt holders to transition their debt into the Ape equity, because at this point, it doesn't actually look like he's going bankrupt, but there is some time delay between now and, you know, there might be some time delay between when he's able to get the company profitable. I'm talking just to the debt holders now. On the equity, that is going to trade very volatile until we get through this. But from the debt holders' perspective, what they care about is getting the return on their capital back, because they lent the man money. They just want to be paid back. And so I will go through that in gross detail, because honestly, it's the short sellers that created this opportunity of Ape specifically. It is not the people that have come in and bought Ape to try to support the stock. Okay, let's see. All right. We're getting close to, yeah. Let me see if there's one last question. I might have to close this out pretty soon. Okay, this is cool. Yeah, it's really country. Von Steuben, good morning. Thank you for watching. But only 2 to 3 brokers allow the vote, and only if shares are moved to U.S. custody before. Okay, that's really good intelligence. I really don't know what the deal is overseas. So really, it truly is going to be broker dealers and people that specialize in foreign shares in Europe that you're going to want to ask to be able to get the vote. But it wouldn't be because AMC is not allowing you to vote. That would be a bunch of malarkey. All right, guys. I do answer personally all of the comments in the comment section, so I will get to it. Once I close out the video, YouTube does something strange where I don't necessarily see all of the chat so much, but just like I'll close it out in a second, and then put your comments below and I'll try to look into it. Have an amazing morning. I hope you guys all make money, and take care.